Debate. The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, here we go again. And we're here in this place dealing with another example of Liberals who don't seem to understand that their job is to represent Canadians and not represent the best interests of their best friends and their business partners. Of course, I'm talking about the saga of the other Randy. So we don't know who the other Randy is, and that's one of the main reasons that we find ourselves here today. One of the questions that the witness, Mr. Anderson, refused to provide to committee when he had an obligation to do so. Now, why do we need to know who the other Randy is? Well, at the heart of this is the minister from Edmonton, the Liberal minister from Edmonton, who was found out to own 50% of a business while he was serving in a cabinet, and it was believed that he was directing the operations of that company. Now, the minister said, of course, it's another Randy. We heard from members of the Liberal caucus that perhaps it was Randeep, and we heard from the witness, Mr. Anderson, that he could only tell us if we held an in-camera, a private meeting of the Ethics Committee so that he would reveal it to us. Now, the committee rejected that. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. If they've got nothing to hide, they should show us who the other Randy is. But it gets worse, because in the multiple appearances at committee that we've had of witnesses on this strange story of the Liberal minister from Edmonton and his business dealings, we learned, of course, that this NDP Liberal government did award a contract to that Liberal minister's business while he was serving in cabinet. That's outrageous. And of course, it's not allowed under the conflict of interest regime that we have in this country. Said another way, it's illegal. And we heard from the minister, he said when he first appeared at committee that he hadn't been in touch with his business partner, Mr. Anderson, in 2022. He said it. He was explicit that he hadn't. But the thing is about this company and about everyone who seems to be involved in it is that it's pretty sketchy. And that sketchy company is involved in a massive lawsuit that alleges fraud of $500,000. There's an unexplained but suspicious warehouse fire that targeted only the inventory at this Liberal minister's company's warehouse. And so through the legal system, we're learning through the disclosures that there has in fact been contact in direct contradiction to what that Liberal minister said. He said he had not talked to his business partner in 2022. And then he had his ministry talk to the media and say it was impossible for the minister to have communicated with Mr. Anderson on the days in question when he referenced Randy 9 times in text messages. Mr. Anderson claiming, obviously not believably, that these were 9 autocorrects, so he couldn't tell us what was being autocorrected. And the recipient of those messages, of course, never challenged him on who the other Randy was, because it was always represented to be the business partner, the individual who owned a 50% share in that business, the Liberal minister from Edmonton. And the minister's staff said, well, he can't have communicated because he was in cabinet. He was locked up. He flew into Vancouver, and before he got there, they must have taken his phone and put it in a box, and he didn't get it back for weeks. He didn't talk to anybody. They said it was impossible. But then we demanded his phone records. But he only provided one phone. But we know he's got another one. So we had to issue another demand for phone records and text messages. Well, guess what we found out? That, well, the Liberal minister's business partner was telling the victims of this fraud, worth about $500,000, that Randy was in Vancouver and needed answers. Well, the minister from Edmonton was in Vancouver at that time. And though his office said that he couldn't get these messages, well, in the last time that he testified at committee, and I want to reference a story from Blacklock's reporter from Friday, September 20th, titled, "Minister Changes His Story." And it in fact says that he admitted to both being in a text message exchange and a phone call with his business partner during that 2022 retreat. Well, what changed? So how is it? What's it called when someone says something that they know isn't true?
It's a lie.
Well, yeah, I heard people say it makes them want to cry. And it certainly does. When you have a minister from this NDP Liberal government who comes to committee, a minister of the Crown, they should be able to put their personal interests aside. They legally have to, but we see that that's not been the case for this minister. But to save his own skin, came to committee and said something that we now have proven to be not true, and he then later admitted it at committee. So, was he telling the truth the first time, or was he telling the truth the second time? Well, he was telling the truth when he got caught having not told the truth. And that's the material fact of the matter. So this is what we're dealing with. And his business partner, who defied multipartisan efforts to just tell the truth, he refused. What are they trying to hide? What are they trying to hide in this company where this Liberal minister from Edmonton, his business partner, puts up a handful of Porsches and Land Rovers as collateral in the hours before they incorporate this business together? But this Liberal says, oh, he had no idea. That seems unbelievable. As unbelievable as pretty much everything he said at committee, because we now have the receipts, we now have the records to show that what he said was not true. You can't believe what he's saying, which is very often the case. It's been a case of serial ethical lawbreaking by the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet. But now we have his minister who's just saying one thing when another is the truth. And this isn't acceptable in a parliamentary committee. It's contemptuous in and of itself. In a courtroom, it's perjury. Had the minister been asked to swear an oath, it would be perjury. Perjury in this country is punishable by up to 14 years in prison. There's a common sense conservative private members bill that will come before this House when we're done dealing with all the matters of contempt that arise, all the matters of privilege that arise from this broken government after its 9 years. And that bill will deal with fines of $50,000 for contempt and a mandatory 6 months in prison for perjury before a House of Parliament. Isn't it about time that we had real consequences? Isn't it about time? But we're going to have Mr. Anderson come before the bar. And members across party lines, like that report came out of committee recognizing the refusal of the witness to answer the questions, all members of this House should be in lockstep that it is unacceptable to come before a parliamentary committee and to refuse to provide the answers that are requested. Very reasonable answers. This whole issue is only at the committee. It hinges on who Randy is. One name was kind of the hallmark ask for that committee, and this individual refused. Along with a host of text message records and phone records he refused to provide. Just like his business partner, that Liberal minister refused to provide the the full material that was requested by the committee and had to be asked multiple times. The ethics commissioner took a preliminary look at it and said, I don't think there's anything here. But then some of the half-truths of that minister were exposed. And he had to take another look at it. But with the information he had, he didn't proceed with a finding against that Liberal minister. And the Liberals held it up and they said, look, he didn't do anything wrong. The ethics commissioner is not launching an investigation and finding him to have broken the law like the Prime Minister has twice, or the Public Safety Minister, or the former Finance Minister, or the Trade Minister, or with these Liberal benches. The ethics commissioner had to look at it again, but he still doesn't have all of the information and doesn't have the power to, of course, order the minister to produce it. He's just asking him. Well, we asked him, and he didn't give us all the information. A $500,000 fraud. Contracts being given to a member of cabinet. At the same time, that same minister had his name listed in the corporate registry for a lobbying firm. Oh, it got left on there by accident, he said. And then he got paid by that lobbying firm while he was sitting as a minister. Oh, it was a deferred payment, he swears. Now, does he swear like he said he didn't talk to Mr. Anderson in 2022, but now we have the receipts that show that he did? It's highly suspicious what's going on. Highly suspicious. But these Liberals don't see the forest for the trees. And today we, of course, had a common sense conservative motion recognizing that after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government with taxes up, costs up, crime being up, that their time is up. Why is it that there isn't government legislation on the floor of the House? Why? They're trying to get as many opposition days out of the way as they can. And now they're stuck dealing with these matters that stem from corruption, like the matter that's going to be dealt with tomorrow in the House, the $1 billion green slush fund. The government refusing an order of Canadians to produce the information. The misinformation, the government House leader in the past week produced a perfect example for the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics study on misinformation and disinformation. Government disinformation produced with taxpayer-funded resources by the Liberal House leader. And she spun this tale about Canadians' rights being trampled on because a majority of members in this House, all democratically elected, ordered the production of documents from their government about their corruption. But they say it's an erosion of Canadians' rights too great to bear. Oh my goodness. When the government is so terrified that documents about their corruption are going to be turned over to the RCMP for the RCMP just to consider. They're going to look at them. They don't have to investigate. They have independence. They can make that decision. The Liberals don't even want the Mounties to see it because we know there's been examples before where this Liberal Prime Minister has invoked cabinet confidence to block documents from being released to the RCMP. In matters concerning criminal allegations against that Liberal Prime Minister. But he blocked them. He used cabinet confidence, which is not its purpose, of course, to provide a get-out-of-jail-free card for the Prime Minister, but of course that's what they used it for. And what is the $1 billion green slush fund that they don't want the documents going to the law clerk to the RCMP? Well, the Prime Minister appointed his friend Annette Verscherian, who, like that Prime Minister, was found guilty of breaking ethics laws, padding the pockets of herself and Liberal insiders with hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's what this is all about. Now, the Sustainable Development Technologies Canada is what it was called in its inception. And of course, in 2017, after Conservatives had left office, it received a clean bill of health from Canada's Auditor General. Not so after a couple of years of the self-interested and economic vandals that occupy the government benches. They stacked the board, they lined their pockets, and now they're trying to cover it up, blatantly disobeying an order of Canada's Parliament. What's the common theme here? It's a disregard by these Liberals for basic honesty, for transparency, for the rule of law, and for democracy. That's their legacy. When we talk about time being up after 9 years, this is what we're talking about. They won't even... Now, there's things we're allowed to say. There's things we're allowed to say, and there's things we're not allowed to say. And saying that a minister lied is not something we're allowed to do. But
now we have a point of order. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, Government House Leader.
And just so the member is aware, as I know he is, you can't do something indirectly that you are not supposed to be doing directly. So the implication in terms of the member opposite is kind of playing on words, I suspect, if you just review in terms of what it is he just said.
I apologize. I hope I'll get it better next time. I wasn't paying attention. The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
doth thou protest too much, colleague? Indeed, time we will find out, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. And my goodness, we need a lot of disinfectant over there. And we are going to tirelessly pursue every scandal. We are going to tirelessly pursue every dollar that they've misspent, misappropriated, or overseen the theft of. We have, Speaker, can you imagine that I've been talking for more than 15 minutes about government corruption. I haven't even been able to get to their $60 million Arrive scam. I haven't got to the $1 billion to the Kielburgers, their friends at the We organization. I haven't got to talk about the now public safety minister, former fisheries minister, giving lucrative contracts and clam scam to his family members. The former finance minister, Mr. Morneau, making sure that the We organization got into a contract with these Liberals when his children were working there to help enrich them. These guys haven't found a Canadian taxpayer dollar that they haven't promised to one of their buddies before they've taken it out of the jeans of the person that earned it. 9 years. And when we have the business partner for a sitting cabinet minister who comes before committee and conducts himself in the way that the Speaker has ruled represents prima facie case of privilege, when we have a Liberal cabinet minister from Edmonton who comes to committee and says one thing and then when we show him the receipts of what actually happened, says, oh yeah, the other thing is true. So of course, when Mr. Anderson comes before the bar of the House, we're going to need to find out who is the other Randy. And Mr. Speaker, I think that there won't be a surprised face in here if we find out that it's that Liberal minister from Edmonton.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And there's no surprise coming from me listening to the member opposite. Actually, he's been conspiring all sorts of imaginations that have driven him to be the attack dog on anything that even has any hint of corruption. And if it isn't corrupt, he'll still imply that it's corrupt. The minister he's talking about is not once, but twice has been cleared by the ethics commissioner. Yet the member persists on trying to assassinate the character of ministers of this government, whether it's justified or not. And I underline the word not because that is an issue that the member opposite continuously has more than any other member inside the House, where he tries to assassinate the character of the individual. My question is, does he believe that the ethics commissioner did his job when he cleared the minister that he's now trying to assassinate the character with?
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
A lot to unpack there. First of all, the Parliamentary Secretary does his best impersonation of a good defense, but he talks about conspiracy. There's no conspiracy. That Liberal Prime Minister was the first in Canadian history to have been found guilty not once, but twice of breaking the law.
And when did it become the law?
Twice. And he can't handle it. So let's talk about the other ministers who broke the law. And he talks about, whether or not the ethics commissioner ruled on that minister from Edmonton Centre. He didn't do an investigation. You know why? He's not getting all the facts from that member, the Liberal member from Edmonton Centre. Just like the member from Edmonton Centre came to committee and said one thing when another thing was true, said he'd given us all his phone records when he hadn't. Of course the same is true for what he's not providing to the ethics commissioner. Edmonton Centre deserves better than that Liberal MP, and Canadians deserve better than this corrupt Liberal government.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The strength of a democratic parliament comes from the trust that people have in said parliament. When people speak mistruths in committee, or when they do not provide documents that are requested, it's as if they were saying that Parliament doesn't deserve their trust or their confidence. It's as if they're saying that they don't trust the parliamentarians' work. And when witnesses do that in committee, well, obviously Canadians and Quebecers wonder. I would like my colleague I would like him to talk about the importance of the trust that we receive from our fellow citizens, but also that of witnesses. The Honourable Member.
We've seen repeated examples. This is a great question from the member for Beauport-Limoilou. Canadians elect their representatives, and they've sent the 338 to this place. And we've seen now that this Liberal government on more than one occasion has flatly refused the majority will of this Parliament. That should concern Canadians. And we see in matters dealing with government corruption that people affiliated with them, like in this case with the minister from Edmonton Centre's business partner, refusing to answer questions, just like when Mr. Firth and the Prime Minister's $60 million Arrive scam refused to answer questions to try and protect, they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. Canadians should expect and must be able to expect that when someone comes before a parliamentary committee or before the House, that they will answer in a fulsome way and truthfully, and anything less is unacceptable, just like it's unacceptable for this government to continue to defy the orders of a majority of elected representatives.
Question commentaire, the honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague for his excellent speech and the work that he does on the ethics file. He's doing yeoman service on behalf of all Canadians. Everybody who pays taxes in this country owes a debt of gratitude to the Conservative Party of Canada for the hard work that we're doing to protect the interests of taxpayers from this particular government. But I think the burning question that everybody wants to know is, does my colleague know who the other Randy actually is?
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, I appreciate the question from the honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe. He's been here a long time. He's seen a lot of Liberal scandals. And just like in the Green Slush Fund case, which, of course, government officials have even themselves described as sponsorship-level scandal, that's the last one that took down a Liberal government. It's no wonder that they don't want to release the documents in the billion-dollar Green Slush Fund. In this case, a scandal that exposes the Liberal minister from Edmonton Centre and his practices in cabinet that are obviously unacceptable to Main Street Canadians. The question to the minister was if he knew who Randy was, and he said it was another Randy. And the question to his business partner was, who is the other Randy? And he said, I'll tell you if you shut the cameras off. And he didn't. And this is something that we're going to need to find out. But what we do know is that when we asked straight questions to the minister for Edmonton Centre, the Liberal minister from Edmonton Centre, he would give one set of truths at one meeting and a different set of truths that aren't the same at the next meeting. Obviously, it's unacceptable. Obviously, it doesn't allow us to get transparency and accountability for Canadians. And that's why it's so important that we have Mr. Anderson come here and he can tell us who the other Randy is, even if he just needs to point right over there.
Question et commentaire, questions and comments. The honourable member, just be fair, the honourable parliamentary secretary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know that the Conservatives believe at the end of the day that they need to pursue these types of issues, and as much as they want to do that, I think it's important that we continue to recognize that there are many other issues that our Canadians are having to face. Issues that deal with legislation that we're bringing forward, as an example. And the question I have for the member across the way, what does he envision in terms of just time in having to discuss this particular motion and the motion that he has up for yesterday? Some might think that they're using it as a mechanism to prevent legislation from being discussed.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Oh, that accountability really gets in the way of a good Liberal grift, am I right? Anything but taking a minute to talk about how they're lining the pockets of their well-connected buddies. While Canadians are lined up at food banks in record numbers, food banks in my community and food banks in communities right across this country have seen their use double, having to expand their hours so that they can serve people, their groceries in between shifts at two jobs. These are people, we've got 1 in 4 Canadians saying that they're going to need to use food banks. Well, that's not the unemployment rate. So these are people that are working who can't afford to feed themselves and feed their families after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. And why? Because it's $60 million to 2 yo-yos in their basement in the Arrive scam. It's $1 billion in the Green Slush Fund with a hand-picked Liberal chair. It's example after example, $21 billion to their buddies in the consulting class in 1 year alone. That's what these guys are spending their money on. And so we need to expose that because we need to stop it, and we need to get Canadians their money back because they need it. They need every single penny. So I know it's real inconvenient for that member and for these Liberals to talk about the consequences of their actions, but that's what our job is here, even if they continue to defy the will of the majority of democratically elected MPs. And that's how we know after 9 years that their time is up.
Now, we do have time for one quick exchange. The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a quick question for my honourable member, and that is, if Mr. Anderson had to put up his vehicles for collateral, he would have had to obtain an ILA because someone else is getting the benefit of that collateral. Did that come out in questioning?
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes in 30 seconds.
We have an example here where the Liberal minister from Edmonton Centre is in business dealings with someone who has a very shady and questionable reputation to be gentlemanly. That's my assessment of it. And so this requires a much deeper look, and while the Liberals are already trying to shut down the discussion about this very thing, it's through the committee process we've exposed this Liberal minister's ties to this unsavory character. Edmonton Centre deserves better. Canadians deserve better. Mr. Anderson must testify at the bar of the House of Commons.